in Narva, but across the river in Narva you can see the Empire of Moscow. You can see Russia. You see a Russian flag, and on this side you can see the three flags. You can see a NATO flag, an Estonian flag, and the European Union flag. We got Herman Castle. I should move so that you can see it a little bit better. This is on my side of the river Narva, and that over there is the opposite side. So today's live stream on my geopolitics channel, I am going to just discuss briefly about the situation here geopolitically in the three Baltic states and Estonia, and whether there is a significant geopolitical risk with the country on this side attacking the country on this side here where I'm standing. And Tere, hello. If you're new to this channel, my name is Connor Klein, and I have a background in international relations. You could call me an international relations expert. I've been living in Ukraine for many years, speak the language of this country, Russia over there, Ukrainian. Unfortunately, I don't speak much Estonian, so I'm here to give you a unique perspective on the happenings of the Russo-Ukrainian war. So over there we got the new Cold War. So this kind of temperature and climate is quite appropriate to discuss it. And this is maybe the new Iron Curtain right here, the river Narva. Actually, you can see the footbridge across. This is actually an open border, but you do have to go. You can see people pulling their suitcases across. There is no road border open actually at the moment. What I read online is that the Russian side have actually closed it for renovations. It's been about a year and it's expected to be another year, so not really sure why they would do that. So one question I get asked more on my lifestyle channel is, what is the geopolitical risk for the Baltic states? Estonia was part of the Russian Empire at one point. It was obviously part of the Soviet Union. Technically, is occupied. Many countries did not recognize the Soviet annexation of Estonia, and Estonia being part of the USSR. And in the early 90s, it regained its independence. Obviously, the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. And with Russian expansionism and revanchism, especially since 2022 with the extended invasion of Ukraine, many have been asking, what is the situation here for Estonia, for Latvia, for Lithuania, for Poland, countries that were either in the Soviet Union, like the three Baltic states, or Poland, that were not actually annexed formally, but they were in the Soviet sphere of influence, they were in the Warsaw Pact. How concerned should they be? And the long and the short of it is, the extended invasion has been going on for almost 3 years now. February 24th will be the 3rd-year anniversary. And Russia currently controls less than 20% of Ukraine. And they are a long way off, when we look at things right now, of achieving their goals in Ukraine, which is to control Ukraine. Maybe they won't formally annex all of it, but definitely to change the government in Kiev, have a client state there, vassal state. And then that would free them up to look at regaining other parts of their former empire. Russia, in effect, is an empire. It's not a nation state. So that is what Estonia would be particularly concerned about, is that some of the other parts of the former empire that were part of the Soviet Union have obviously become independent. There were 15 constituent republics. They all became independent in the early 90s. One of them being Russia. So the other 14 would have to be concerned that if Ukraine was taken back under control, Belarus is obviously de facto in Russia's orbit with the Union state, which is not fully implemented, that then they would turn their attention here. That is one very plausible scenario, that you would suddenly see an increase in Russian propaganda talking about how the people of the Baltics are impressed by some sort of Third Reichish regime. So you could imagine the same sort of rhetoric as was the case against Ukraine. It's still the case against Ukraine. They still ramble on about it. And then that would be the first steps to perhaps having a military incursion here. They would probably take troops and move them to this part of their border, because at the moment, from what we've been led to believe, there aren't actually so many Russian troops on this side of the border actually with NATO. Same with Finland. They've moved those and are currently using them in Ukraine. So that's one scenario. That Russia were to win, I think that's a very low probability event. Certainly in the short term, maybe in the medium to long term, depending what happens now that Donald Trump is back in the White House. Maybe there's some policy that is unhelpful to Ukraine and helpful to Russia, but I'm even skeptical about that, having seen the first day or two of his new presidency. So that is one scenario, although it is not a very likely scenario in the short to medium. Well, in the short term for sure. We say short term is the next 2 years that Russia will have a victory in Ukraine. That doesn't look at the moment like that's going to be the case. However, if, for example, there was some sort of peace agreement, I'm putting peace in quotation marks, because without the defeat of Russia, or Russia changing its policy of wanting to regain control of parts of its former empire, say there was this kind of bad scenario for Ukraine that they were forced to have a ceasefire and didn't have any long-term security guarantees. Russia maintained its ambitions to control Ukraine in the medium to long term. Then the question would arise, well, if Russia is not, Russia has a few hundred, well, what is it, 600, 700,000 troops deployed in the Ukrainian theater, not all on the front line, probably around half of them are not actually at the front line, they're doing support roles. What would Russia do with those troops? Would they just demobilize them, take them back home, and have all these men who suddenly would go back to their normal wages, which would probably be a fraction of what they earn in the Russian military? These would be men who would be, presumably many of them would be traumatized by the experience of being in a war, and they certainly are used to being violent. I find that very, very unlikely that Vladimir Putin would want that to happen. In fact, especially when he could deploy them somewhere else. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean he would deploy them here in Narva across the river, but it is definitely a very plausible scenario that if there were some sort of peace deal, inverted commas, in Ukraine, that Russia would just simply redeploy its troops to put pressure at least on the 3 Baltic states, maybe Finland. They could, of course, move them somewhere else. They could move them to Kazakhstan, the border with Kazakhstan, to maybe with Georgia and Azerbaijan, especially because there are protests in Georgia at the moment. Maybe that's something they would think about doing if the government changed, if suddenly there was a pro-EU government in Tbilisi. Maybe they would want to move their troops there and intimidate Georgia, maybe do what they did in Ukraine after the Euromaidan revolution. That was obviously to attack Crimea and Donbass at the time. So probably a bad scenario for the 3 Baltic states and Estonia would be some sort of peace deal, inverted commas, in Ukraine, because that would mean that Russia would have battle-hardened troops that then they could free up and deploy here to at least intimidate Estonia, maybe put a lot of pressure on them, and potentially maybe even test Article 5 of the NATO treaty. You can see probably the NATO flag behind me. Article 5 is a self-defense clause, common defense clause, that if one member state is attacked, that the other countries in the NATO alliance, they take measures to protect and assist the country that has been attacked. That has never really been tested, so we don't know exactly what countries would do in reality if Article 5 were invoked. It was invoked once by the US, but it wasn't to do with Russia. Obviously, NATO was created as a defensive alliance against the Soviet Union. Russia is the successor state to the Soviet Union, and unfortunately, it doesn't seem to want to live in peace with its neighbors, with invasions not just of Ukraine, but also Georgia in 2008 and others that we could mention. So that is my short video. The snow is starting to come down here again. I've been asked about the geopolitical risk for the 3 Baltic states. Right now, the geopolitical risk of a Russian invasion, a full-scale invasion, like something like we've seen in Ukraine, is very low. They are in NATO, so presumably the other countries will be obligated, or they are obligated to come to their assistance, that they will protect Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania if there were some sort of invasion or attack. However, there can be many aggressive actions that can be taken by Russia that are below the threshold that would result in Article 5 Article 5 being invoked. For example, you've seen cables been cut, underwater cables between Estonia and Finland. If Russia was the country that organized that, then that would be aggressive action, but it wouldn't lead to Article 5. So for now, geopolitical risk is low. However, if there is some sort of peace in inverted commas in Ukraine that doesn't involve a change of policy by the Russian government, that they give up on revanchism of taking back parts of their former empire, then that is not good for the medium to long term for a country like Estonia, that Russia wouldn't try to come here as well at some point. And obviously, if Russia wins in Ukraine, that is very bad news for the 3 Baltic states, because then they would obviously be in a very gung-ho mood. So I'm going to leave it like that. 10-minute live stream as the snow starts to come down in Narva. I will say bye-bye from here. And if you are interested in Ukraine, I have a guide down below for going to Ukraine at this time with the Russo-Ukrainian war. Obviously gives you a lot of logistical advice and many tips on how to stay safe, obviously with the caveat that you are going to a country that has been attacked. It's the biggest war in Europe since World War II. I have my hospitality guide there, so that is down below in the description. And with that, I will bid you a peaceful, what day of the week? Is Tuesday today, or it's Wednesday? It's Wednesday. Okay, I'll bid you a peaceful Wednesday afternoon, and hope you're staying warmer than I am here. Oh, we have a bird that's come to listening to the live stream. So, ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.